Hi, my name is Duncan Clark, and I will be presenting a poster for my COGS 499 philosophy paper project. So the main issue I'm concerned with in this paper is whether or not the self exists, and the self is defined as the enduring, unchanging center of experience, which epitomizes what we are and encompasses our beliefs, values, and characteristics. And for myself, this would be the Duncanness, which might be somewhere inside me, defining who I am. So the primary disagreement I'm dealing with in this paper is between minimal self-realists and no-self or self-illusionism positions. And minimal self-realists believe that the self exists and attempt to ground it in some structural feature of consciousness. And this manifests in different ways, with some thinkers like Zahavi grounding the self in pre-reflective self-consciousness, and others like Dorothy Legrand grounding the self in transparency, which is the representational window through which we apprehend the world. And self-non-realists or self-illusionists, in contrast, claim that the self does not exist, and also claim that minimal self-realists are conflating structural features of consciousness with the self. We also have a parallel discussion happening concerned with narrative selves, which consider the self as a fictional mental abstractum that is constructed through the process of reflecting on ourselves. And so the main objective of this paper is to put forward a case for the illusory self, which synthesizes narrative accounts to ultimately account for all the intuitions we have of what the self is. So in terms of these intuitions, even if we grant that the self is non-substantive, as all contemporary positions claim, there remains to be two key necessary properties that a coherent account of self must possess. And the first of these properties is the capacity to be individuated. So we have this deep intuition that we are ourselves precisely in contrast to the selves which other people are. And the second property is diachronic unity. That is, we remain fundamentally the same self over time. And this is necessary to account for the impression that we are the quote-unquote same person as we were at age 7, for instance. So one of the primary arguments I make against minimal self-realism concerns empirical cases which threaten these two properties. So minimal self-realists claim that diachronic unity is preserved through things like dreamless sleep and comas because the self has been defined as a structural feature of consciousness. So if conscious experience as a whole is fully interrupted, the self can also be safely interrupted in tandem while preserving diachronic unity. However, I introduce cases such as flow states in meditation, where conscious experience is preserved, but it has been widely demonstrated that the self can dissipate in both of these instances. And with respect to individuation, I describe a series of psychopathologies which result in a widening or broadening or a narrowing or shortening of the subjective self model, which introduces a problem as to how these edge cases of selves might be individuated. And I then return to the narrative model and observe that these two properties of individuation and diachronic unity are in fact preserved, and I propose a conjunctive model of the illusory self. So according to this model, the self emerges through a process of misattributing characteristics of the narrative self onto the minimal self, that is, some structural feature of consciousness. Our mental model of our narrative self possesses these properties of individuation and diachronic unity, and we impose these properties onto the minimal self, which in turn reifies the self as some real thing. And a crucial aspect of this model is that the self is illusory, that is, its existence has no corresponding reality outside of experience. And this is analogous to the checkered shadow illusion I have pictured on my poster here, where the difference in color between tiles A and B only exists in our experience, because when we scrutinize these colors more closely, like in the rightmost image, these colors are actually exactly the same. And the self, in the same way, only exists, in a deflationary sense, in instances when we actively reflect on our experiences, beliefs, values, and so on. The moment we interrupt this reflection, the self ceases to exist. So to conclude, according to this model, there is no capital T true self. We are not passengers in the metaphorical vehicle of our bodies. There is no locus of experience defining who we are, and there is merely the flow of experience with thoughts, sensations, and perceptions appearing and passing away.